Thank you for tuning in to Reviving Humanity. Today's episode, Holding History Accountable, is a spinoff to one of my previous episodes, How White Supremacy Divides Black America. Now, the topic is so grand that it may even need to be broken down into a few other parts. However, today's episode will specifically focus on holding our history accountable. We've never done it. Not truly. Not as Black or white Americans in this country. As I said, slavery happened. The Jim Crow laws happened. They bled into our timeline. They bleed into us. The atrocities against Black America happened, happens, continues to happen, but we do not hold it accountable for its actions. Now, some of you may not like what I have to say, but the truth, as we all know, it stings, but it must be acknowledged. We've soared so far above resilience that we don't believe the reality that we live in. Our ancestors, slavery, it ended on day one, and then day two, we were breaking bread with our captors. We're the only race of people who can live resiliently enough to move past the trauma that continues to haunt us. We've soared above the Jim Crow laws as they were written out of history on day one. Yet day two, we were transforming ourselves to fit into white supremacy if we haven't been doing that sooner. Now, not all of us, I'm not saying all of us, but enough of us have been doing this to the point that we have not been able to hold our history accountable. We need to face it. As I said in the episode, How White Supremacy Divides Black America, we need to have these conversations. I cannot press this enough. We need to have these conversations so that instead of us saying, we are, as you know, is a great compliment to us, how resilient and strong we have been to continue to rise above the challenges, to rise above the supremacy. We rise, but we do not hold anything accountable. When we hold it accountable, changes can be made. We can finally have acknowledgement of what happened. I heard someone, and I do not know his name, but I was watching a YouTube video where a white man, it was posted by a Black woman, but a white man was honestly saying how he was taught racism, how he was taught that as long as we pretend that racism doesn't exist, it will go away. You see, this is what we have been doing. And we as Black people, we have been allowing this to happen, to continue, because we want to make white people feel comfortable. Do you not? We want to make them feel comfortable, but it's time to shake things up. It's time to make things uncomfortable so that we can finally move past our past in this country, so that we can finally get to a place where we have a say. This is our country too, where we have a say in the laws of this land. I really want people listening to be able to see that I am not trying to, let me just say this. I want you to understand that I am not here to throw around insults or to upset or hurt anyone's feelings, but I am here to help you to see how you play your role in not holding history accountable. A lot of us, we want to just say, well, racism doesn't exist. Maybe even get to the point where we say that slavery never existed. I don't know. Okay, but it is time that we live in reality, that we stop running from our past and our present, because it affects our future. We will not be here one day. We will not be here. But our descendants, they will be here. What kind of world do you really want to leave behind for them? I want to talk about how we are not holding history accountable so that we can work toward, so that you yourself listening, no matter what race you are, no matter what your skin color is, you can begin to hold that history accountable. Because as we move forward into tomorrow, today becomes history. It is all history. Now, when I said, I want to just, explain, because a lot of people, they like to take things. A lot of people like to take things and run with it into their own direction instead of hearing the message. So when I said that slavery ended on day 1 and day 2, we were breaking bread with our captors. What do I mean by that? It's that resilience. We continue to, and like I said, it's not everyone, not every single person, okay? But it is enough of us that we have not allowed history to be held accountable. So that is what we do. As Black people, you have to walk into your spaces, walk into corporate America, knowing the history that you live in. But in order to walk through those doors with a smile on your face, what do you have to do? You have to ignore the history, which may have happened yesterday. You have to ignore that history in order to take a seat at your desk, in order to take a seat in your office. You have to walk past those doors. But at what point do we stop thinking about ourselves and start seeing the whole picture? As long as we continue to walk through those doors and not hold history accountable, our history is going to continue to repeat itself. As I said, it will play out in different formats, but it is still repeating itself. So like I said, as a Black person, we, I don't know if it's because of those 3 dots in the back of our skull or what that allows us to be so, I don't want to say forgiving, but it allows us to, knowing our history, move forward in the face of what resembles the pain of our past. It allows us to move forward with a smile. It allows us to do that without acknowledgement. Now, I am not here to say that we need to, break out in war, okay? That we need to break out in war. What I am saying is that we need to hold it accountable so that changes will be made, every single one of us. And not just us as Black people, but white people too. We need to hold that history accountable. As I said, slavery ended. The Jim Crow laws ended. But we were never given the proper acknowledgement of that. We were never given the proper respect, the proper apologies. We did not demand an apology. We were just too busy trying to be resilient and exist and move past and move forward in supremacy. But we need to know who we are. Our ancestors deserve, as Black people, our ancestors deserve that acknowledgement, that true acknowledgement of what they had to deal with. Continuing to play along as if it never happened, as if racism doesn't exist. You are not acknowledging your own ancestor, the blood that flows through you. And whether, as a Black American, whether you have Native American blood in you as well, whatever we have, because as you know, we are a mixture of a lot of things, our ancestors are still tied to that slavery, still tied to the Jim Crow laws. Because when you step out of your house, you are not seen as 1/3 Native American, 1/3 Asian, and, whatever else. You are seen by the color of your skin. You are a person of color, and that is how we have always been treated. We do not hold history accountable and allow ourselves to be Americans. to all be Americans. When you go across the globe, you go to France, okay, you go to Russia, all right, and you see people of color who you may say are Black, but they identify and they are identified as their country. They are identified as French, as Russian. But here in America, we continue to be divided by color, by Black and white. I want us to be able to acknowledge what is happening, to step outside of our comfort zones so that we can make our own changes within our own communities, so that we can stand up in our own communities. Now, as I said, and I will say it again, slavery ended in the mid to late 1800s. But as you listen, a lot of us already know that it continued way after it was written out of the law. So slavery ended. The Jim Crow laws ended in the 1960s. Okay. What did we do? What did we do? We continued to have to survive. We had leaders come out and fight for, we had our leaders come out and fight for equality. But then our leaders were taken out of our history. They were literally written out of the story, taken out, ripped out of the story, the leaders that we had who were fighting. And then those leaders who were fighting for equality, they were then told, they were then named racist. They were named the problem. We continued to fight, but we did not hold it accountable. When you hold it, you stand on that. Stand on what our ancestors are owed, that respect, that acknowledgement. This country has never done the right thing. It has never admitted its faults. It has never apologized. And maybe you listening feel like, well, I don't need an apology. My ancestors don't need an apology. I don't want us to act like we need an apology. Obviously, the apology is too late. It's too late. It should have happened. It should have happened hundreds of years ago, but it didn't. How do we hold history accountable now? Because we're not getting that apology. We are not getting that apology from the White House. We just are not. But how can we hold history accountable? I want to tell you, being a Black woman in this country, trying to move up, making a name for herself, it is the most challenging thing besides trying to lose 40 pounds, okay? It is the most challenging thing. All right? Because you know that you have the skill. I'm just going to I'm going to break this down for you. Being a Black woman in white America, I'm just going to be real with you, has been the most oppressive experience thus far in my life. At 18 years old, I went to college. I got a degree in human services, an associate's. And now, listen, I'm not very good with the math. I don't remember how old I was. But in 2012, I went back for visual communications. I got a degree in visual communications that was focused on film and sound. So I learned about film, about editing and sound. In 2017, I wrote and directed my first film, my first independent film, The Drama Club, Part 1. In 2018, I got my first job at a news station. Now, this was a local news station in town. I was a production assistant. At this time, I was 30 years old. A little bit late, because I had first went for human services. My mother said, you cannot find a career in the entertainment world. You need to do something that you can make money with. But then I decided in 2012 to follow my own dreams, my own mind. So it wasn't until I was 30 years old that I got my first job with what I went to school for. Okay. I was 30. In 2019, at that same job, I moved up as a photographer. And I got that job because of my experience, my own independent experience as a filmmaker. I showed them my movie trailer. They saw my skill and they believed in me enough to give me the opportunity to be a photographer alongside the reporter. Now, I'm not going to go into detail about the experience and what that all entailed. But my point is, everything has led me to the next, except for when I got to a point that felt that I was stunted. In 2019 again, when I moved back to California and got another job at another news station as a photographer. I was only there for 1 month before COVID. Everybody knows about COVID, right? I was only there for 1 month. I wrote and published my first novel, Two Truths and a Lie That Set Me Free. Late 2020, I wrote my second. 2021, I wrote my third. And 2022, I wrote my fourth book. So the point in me bringing all of this up is that when we talk about holding history accountable, and a lot of times, and I hear a lot of people say that they know that they have the skill, but they are not either paid what they are due, or they are stunted. They are not able to move up. So during that time, in 2020, I got another job at a news station, but this time I was an editor. And I worked the cameras in the studio. I forgot what that title was called, but it took a lot for me just to get through that door. It was because of who I knew at the previous news station before COVID. Right when COVID hit, it was because of that I was able to get through those doors. They gave me a good recommendation. Okay. But as I said, I also started to write. A lot of times we are our best opportunities. We give ourselves our best opportunities. In 2023, I got a job working in marketing for a company that designs panels for office spaces and designs, light fixtures and things like that for businesses, corporate businesses and such. But previously, I already had my experience being a photographer, being a news editor, being a writer, because I had given myself that opportunity, writing and publishing my own novels, directing my own feature film. Yet and again, it takes you knowing your skill, knowing what you have, but you go into these jobs, and a lot of times these jobs are not intended for you to move up. They are intended for you to stay where you are, except for that first experience where I was moved up from a production assistant to a photographer. That was the first time in my life that I was ever promoted within a company. Promoted and, seen. Now, the point in me bringing that up, giving you a layout, a timeline of my job history, a brief timeline of my job history, the point in me bringing that up to you is, how does that connect to holding history accountable? How do I hold history accountable? The way that I hold history accountable is with my own independent artwork. The way that I hold history accountable is by confronting it through my art. I could have written books about anything. I could have written fantasy novels. I could have written novels about outer space, but I choose to hold history accountable by shining a light on what we need to see, what we need to acknowledge within ourselves, even going as far as talking about mental health, talking about unity. It has always been my passion to unite this divide that we continue to face. So I hold history accountable by acknowledging who I am and not allowing corporate America, this corporate world that we live in, the supremacy, to tell me who I am. The drama club was not about theater. It was about the drama that exists within all of us, that we refuse to see when we look in the mirror. It shines a light on that. My books forces you as the reader to acknowledge your own action, your own ignorance, and it gives you a way to see how we can come together. So that is how I hold history accountable, by not running from it, but by confronting it through my art. So as I said, a lot of times you are your best opportunity. You give yourself the best opportunities because you know if you believe in yourself enough, and you practice and you excel at what you know, you will give yourself the best opportunity. So without me taking a leap to produce my own independent film, I would not have been led down the path that I was led, which was still very tough to move up in. But in the news industry, because I was able to show them something that I did independently for myself, that gave me the opportunity to be a photographer. But let's talk about the present. Let's talk about now. Knowing that history within the last 7 years of my life, knowing my history within the last 7 years of my life, it began with a movie script. And now I'm doing this podcast. I worked for a company that made panels, light fixtures, and felt as, again, an assistant. Began as an assistant, yet doing the work of a project manager, doing the work of a content producer. Yet I did not have the title for it, but I was doing the work. A lot of Black people, especially Black women, I have heard, were not given that pay or the title, yet were doing the work of. And this happens a lot. I know myself. I know my skill set. I know my mind. And the way that I hold history accountable is by not feeding into that supremacy, along with not being recognized, not fully recognized for your abilities, your skill set, your talent, doing the work of something grander than what your title is, than what your pay is, doing the work of that, being held as a follower instead of being molded into a leader. How do I hold that history accountable? In my own way, I acknowledge it. Every day I know that I am a leader, and I do not need to beg you for your permission to give me that chance to lead. I lead all on my own, and I create my own opportunities, using this platform to spread the message of unity, to spread the message of this supremacy that we have been under. But going back into the workplace, dealing with that mental health, if I was not able to acknowledge that, I do not know if I would still be here today, honestly. The way, and I'm going to explain, the way that I tried to hold history accountable was with Juneteenth. So this very same company that I am speaking about, they acknowledge Juneteenth. I wanted to bring that history. I wanted to hold everyone accountable by acknowledging that we still have work to do. And the way that I tried to lead was by gathering all of the 4 Black people in the building together, because it was only 4 of us in the entire building. I tried to gather all 4 of us, and in the end, I was alone. I want to explain to you why and how a lot of us continue to not hold history accountable. So as I said, I wanted to hold history accountable in my own way. Being in the space that I was, I wanted to acknowledge and have people see that we are still living in our past. Played out in different formats, but we are still living in our past. I wanted to educate them on the history of Black people, the history of African people, because without African people, there would not be Black America. Now, some of you may say, well, the Native Americans, okay? There are so many theories, but we know the transatlantic slave trade has contributed to Black people being spread all over across the globe. But now here in the U.S., coming from Africa, now in America, and then being intermixed, I wanted to teach and educate so that people, if you're going to acknowledge Juneteenth, that you understand what you are acknowledging, that you respect what you are acknowledging, that you see what you are acknowledging. And as you as a white person who comes and says, well, how can I help? How can I do my part to not contribute? You do your part by paying attention. You do your part by doing the work, not just coming and saying, well, what can I do so that you can sound like a hero, but actually doing the work and participating. I presented by myself because at the end, there was one person left who said, you know what, I want to participate, but I am afraid. I don't want to say certain things because I don't want to upset my white friends or the company. I don't want to lose my job. This is how we do not hold history accountable when we continue to feed into supremacy in that way, saying, I don't want to make the white person uncomfortable. I don't want my friends to be uncomfortable. But it's okay for us to continue to be the butt end of everyone's joke. It's okay for us to continue to be brutally murdered in the streets. It's okay for us to continue to be paid lesser than in this country. Yet you want to continue to make white people comfortable and make them happy. That is not how you hold history accountable. It's by stepping out of that. So going back to the point, I wanted to hold history accountable by saying we need to acknowledge the truth, acknowledge the ignorance within us that we do not know. And so me and the person, we didn't agree. I said, I'm not going to silence my voice. I don't care about making the white person comfortable. In fact, I want you to become uncomfortable so that we can have this conversation and move forward. Because as I said, and I will continue to say, slavery ended. It was written out of law. The Jim Crow laws were written out of law, yet there was no public acknowledgement of its atrocities. It's as if, my grandmother once told me, and this is actually someone saying sorry, but my grandmother once told me, you cannot be sorry for something when you continue to make the same mistake over and over again. How are you sorry if you're continuing to do this? So I guess America has it right because they're continuing. So it would be silly to apologize for something that is continuing to be played out. However, it's time that we acknowledge our history and hold it accountable. Hold yourself accountable instead of trying to skate by, waiting for a white person to come and say, you know what? Yes, racism is real and I have been taught racism. We already know this. Let's stop waiting for someone else to say it and realize what's happening. I understand the resilience that we have as Black people, and it's honorable to be resilient. But let's not be so resilient that we do not stand on what needs to be acknowledged, that we do not stand on the fact that slavery still exists, that the Jim Crow laws still exist. How do we hold history accountable? How do we hold history accountable so that it will stop repeating itself? I tried to do that with my project. I wanted to lead this project, and as I said, I had to start it out, tried to have 4 people. The 4 of us that were in the entire building ended up with 1, but then we had to go our own ways because I was not going to censor my voice. We allow ourselves to censor our voices so that we can continue to feed supremacy. It is time to stop censoring yourself. When you have your relationship, if you are a person of color and you are engaged with a white person, you have a white boyfriend, you have a white girlfriend, you have a white husband, a wife, whatever. If you allow yourself to censor your voice to make them feel comfortable, how are you not oppressing yourself, oppressing your own voice? And with that oppression comes that mental illness. But let me just finish. Let me wrap up. We had to go our own ways because I was not going to censor my voice. And we both ended up submitting a presentation that was presented, that was emailed throughout the company. I don't know how many people responded to the other person, but I only got about maybe 4 responses. 4 responses of a thank you, that was well written, appreciate the information. 4 out of over 200 plus within the company. Not even the CEO, not even anyone in my marketing area acknowledged it, of what Juneteenth is and how we should acknowledge and honor it. But that is my point. That is a small way of stepping up because it takes a lot when you're worried. When we continue to worry about losing our jobs, our opportunities to supremacy. We don't want to lose our jobs, our friends to supremacy. So we continue to make everyone comfortable. We continue to be resilient. And then that resilience turns into mental illness and we don't even see it. And it takes a lot to be strong, to know your skill set, to know that you are managing, you are, doing multiple jobs, yet getting paid entry level. For me as an artist, I started out, I was always an artist. Working and now, as I explained, working in a company where that artistry is not seen, it is not appreciated, where it has to be transformed into someone else's vision. It is very oppressive. But what do you do in this situation? You have to make your own opportunity, believe in yourself enough because you, as I said, are going to give yourself the best opportunity. If I did not write any books, if I did not direct that movie, what would I really have at this point? Because it's all a domino effect. But it was because of the opportunity that I built for myself. Instead of just depending on, getting out of that mind state that we need white America to give us opportunities when we have the opportunities already within us. Holding history accountable is not skating by and saying I need to make everyone else comfortable. It's not saying that I'm going to continue to accept what you're giving me so that I can live in supremacy. It is saying that you know who you are. You are not going to censor your voice to feed supremacy. There's one final thing that I want to touch on. When I said that slavery ended on day 1, yet we were breaking bread on day 2 with our captors, as you know, we have President's Day. As you know, we have Martin Luther King Jr. Day. As you know, we have Black History Month. As you know, we have Christmas and Thanksgiving. As you know, we now have Juneteenth in law. And as you know, we have the 4th of July. I want to talk about what I have witnessed and what I see. What I see, no matter where I work, the only holidays that are truly acknowledged are Christmas, Halloween, Thanksgiving, the 4th of July, Memorial Day, President's Day, Labor Day, and New Year's. We know the history of our country. Yet Martin Luther King Jr. Day is not truly celebrated, is not truly acknowledged. It's there, you take the day off as a bank. If you have a bank, the banks may be closed. Certain places might be closed. But what are we really doing to acknowledge and honor the way that you acknowledge and honor Memorial Day, the way that you honor and acknowledge Labor Day, the way that you honor and acknowledge President's Day? Okay, honestly, let me just say, I'm not even going to say anything about President's Day. Let's just go back to what I was talking about. So, Black History Month, I was told that it's not the month of celebration, but the month of presenting what you have learned, because for the rest of the 11 months out of the year, we should be learning something. But we are not. How many people in your company, in your culture, your company of culture, how many people acknowledge these Black holidays and truly put respect on that? It takes us individually coming together collectively to demand that respect. You walk around, it's Halloween, and you see all the Halloween decorations. Even the company that I worked for, they celebrate Flannel Week, and they have all the presentations of flannel. They have all the presentations of Halloween and Christmas tree. But when it comes to Black History Month, when it comes to Martin Luther King Jr. Day and what Martin Luther King Jr. was trying to do, which was bring out unity in a world that was filled with hatred, that is still filled with hatred, that is not honored. It is not truly seen. How do we make it honorable and seen? Is by holding history accountable. That is how we truly get that respect that our ancestors deserve when it is time to have these supposed months, days of acknowledgement, and to make that sincere, bring that sincerity out of humanity, bring that sincerity out of humanity. Because as I said, slavery ended, the Jim Crow laws ended, yet they just wanted to skate by as if it never existed, because it continues to exist, because we have not held it accountable. We have not held anyone as a group, as a culture of Black people. We have not held that history accountable, and it is time. I am telling you, I am begging you, please, individually, whoever you are, acknowledge and hold it accountable in your own way, however you can do it, so that we can come together collectively and demand and get that respect that our culture deserves. As you can tell, I'm very passionate. I'm very, very passionate because I'm living in this every single day. I am dealing with my own mental health because of supremacy, because of oppression, constantly having to be resilient, to be strong. But I don't want to just be resilient. I want to acknowledge what exists right in front of us and do something about it, to really make this place the United States of America. That's all I have for today. I hope that you take something away from this episode, that you go out there and you hold history accountable. As always, I want you to stay safe, stay educated, and get to know yourself. Take care.